Setting up and running a tabletop game can take quite a lot of preparation. Even if you're running an online game, there's still so much to consider. I'm sure any of my fellow DMs out there can relate to the difficulty of having to set up and run a session and all the preparation you need to do. Today, I bring you another story from r/RPG horror story. A tale forewarning what happens when you show up to a game completely and totally unprepared. Totally Unprepared by user Mad Skeptic Blog. I'm sorry if this is a bit long, but I was frustrated with this game and felt it belonged here. This happened over the last few weeks. I recently joined a D&D 5e set in a modern sci-fi universe. The DM had posted it looking for players for a game he had hoped to stream. I had figured, okay, this guy seems confident, let's see. He had a modern homebrew that he wanted people to use, and I dove right in, excited. But immediately the red flags went up. After I joined, I find out he had a party before me, and he recruited new people to replace them, including me. Out of 5 players, only one, who seemed to be an IRL friend, remained. 2 left mid-session, 2 ghosted afterwards. All during the very first session. So now we're back up to 5 players and restarting the campaign because it was only 1 session in. The modern rulebook was using the wealth system for all the items and backgrounds, but the DM didn't want to use it and wanted to use normal D&D currency, gold pieces, silver pieces, copper pieces, instead. We started at level 5 and we were told to take 5 times our class's starting money and buy our gear, but without prices, we had no idea what anything cost. We asked the DM, he said he hadn't worked out the prices yet, despite the game starting in a couple of days. 3 sessions in, 4 if you count his aborted session, we had never been told the costs of anything. I had to work it out myself for the group as a means to get the ball rolling, using a couple of other charts in the book and averaging each tier of wealth. Still, several items had no method to establish cost. And luckily, none of us took any of the new subclasses in the book that relied on them. Okay, well, this is my first group on Roll20, so maybe they are like this here. Figured I'd tough it out and give it a shot. The first session starts with a bit of character intro to the world to establish why they are there, then cut to an invasion and a monologue via hologram. The DM keeps making weird jumps in thought as he talks, which tells me he's not scripted this, he's improvising it as he goes. But he'd restarted the campaign after the first session. This is his second time, and he seemingly hasn't prepared. Minor thing, but whatever. We play through a combat sequence of escaping a city into the woods under fire. This part seemed to go semi-decently, aside from some of the stuff he tells us being weird. Like the locals being astounded at seeing an SUV and accusing us of being the enemy. But they live in a city with a spaceport and holograms. He also makes up really over-the-top reasons for not letting us go do things. When we searched the bodies of troops that dropped in the drop pods and looked for comms gear, it all had self-destructed on their deaths. The second session, we got to choose 2 routes. We could do a dungeon for a MacGuffin to activate shields and space turrets from an ancient people over the base we escaped to with the refugees. Or we could negotiate with the turtle people for help because they had lost a sporting event in the past and were unwilling to help while their planet was being invaded. We chose the defenses because, hey, we'd like a semi-safe place to stay. We're told this will be the DM's first dungeon. He said he had experience as a DM, so this was odd. But we go ahead. Before we go down, my wizard tries to talk with the only wizard around and ask if he'd be willing to let her study off his spellbook. I'm hoping for the opportunity to pay to learn spells or something. The wizard claims his spellbook is sentient and will attack anyone but him who tries to learn from it. No, sorry, I don't know you or trust you. Or, not right now. Or, it'll cost you. Just flat out that his spellbook eats people. More over-the-top reactions for railroading. I found out later he seems to think I wanted to steal the spellbook. This actually plays out more later, as this DM had a tendency to not listen to the things people actually said, and tried to guess at what they were aiming for, and jumped to really murder hobo-style conclusions and assumed that's what we were doing. Check a door if it's locked? Okay, you unlock the door and open it. Roll initiative. His dungeon is a download of Warlock of Fire Mountain, but only the bottom half. Every single door is locked, it seems. We only found like 4 unlocked doors in the whole place. Every single room is a blank room, with 2 types of monsters and clumps of the same type in a given room. Every piece of loot was in a chest, and most locked. Also, if you rolled a 1 on picking a lock, your whole set of thieves' tools broke. Not one pick, the whole set. He made someone roll an intelligence check to use mending to repair it, despite the spell not actually requiring anything like that. This was a pattern, as if we rolled a 1, whatever we were using broke, or we couldn't use that cantrip for 1 round. But often, enemies didn't have this issue. We struggled at first, and about halfway through the session, our only melee character quits the game mid-session. But we trudge on. Session 3. We introduce a new character. He shows up as a controlled robot with a person inside, sorta like a Cyberman. +10 to attack, 2 attacks a round, smokes 2 people down to half health in the first round of combat. I call for a retreat, and the DM retcons it to heavily injured. When we rescue the guy, we found out he came here 2 days ago. No keys, no skills at lockpicking. None of the automations we fought have keys, but somehow he got in despite us having to unlock every single door, walked past us when 2 players didn't need sleep, and had a familiar out on watch. After he's freed, he has no gear, so we're looking around all over to find him his starting gear, as he's a fighter without any weapons. We started just roaming corridors looking for unlocked doors. I reason if he can't unlock doors, the only room he could have come from had to be unlocked. The DM finally clued in after we kept skipping every room in the hallway and left the room he came from unlocked. Improvised puzzle with an altar and a wall that both detected as magical. We investigate the wall and the altar. We cast Identify on it, but we can't figure out how to open the wall up to get his gear. We are eventually allowed strength checks, which we fail. Finally, a different person investigates the altar with a lower roll and finds out weight will open the wall. You know, putting something on the thing where you sit someone down to get turned into a robot. And for some reason, putting an item on it opens the wall, but doesn't cause a Cyberman upgrade on the person setting it off. We went to search other rooms, and in 4 rooms behind locked doors were tablets with plot exposition sitting in the middle of the room. Each time, the DM would take a minute to type out what's on it, but you could tell from the grammar and spelling mistakes and how none of it flowed together that he ad-libbed all of it. This was our 2nd session in here, and he hadn't even bothered to just write it out himself so he could copy and paste it. He just had a general idea and managed to confuse us a bit with the wording. But the first time I used the web and telekinetic feat to lock down a room of Duergar hammerers while we pelted them with ranged cantrips, suddenly the web spell now just all burns away, not just 5 feet, if you sneeze anything hot at it. We played smart, we learned from our enemy's tactics, and he house ruled nerfed our CC right away. After much exploring, we got to a boss room. The boss is huge-sized, but all of the corridors leading up to him were 5 feet wide. The boss goes on a giant monologue about how we can get the MacGuffin to the defenses if we defeat him in battle, or we share in his curse and become immortal robots. An orbital bombardment is coming down as we speak. We're in the basement of the place, so we're all, the boss included, in danger and on a time limit. We try to convince him, but it's one way or the other with him. The conversation sorta goes like this. PCs. Fine, so if we take the curse, we get the key? DM. Yes. When the curse is complete, that person will get the key. Oh, so only one of us? Yes. Okay, how long does it take to become cursed? 1 year. Well, we need the key now, not 1 year from now. You will get the key once you received my curse. So, does that mean you'll give us the key right away once someone is infected with the curse? I will join you and provide my knowledge and wisdom to the people above who are now in this place that I once built that they now live in. So no. Yes. It went like this for a while. We eventually played rock, paper, scissors for who of the volunteers to be cursed would get it. Afterwards, it was a giant monologue between 3 NPCs. Yes, the huge-sized robot got through all the 5-foot-wide corridors to get out of here, then suddenly can shrink to medium size when he wants to hand off his sword of power after realizing this thing is stupid huge and no one can do anything with it. Only about half of the conversation made any sense. He kept repeating himself and using really weird phrasing for everything like, the people who are here in this place where I once built my kingdom, what was once my home, but is not my home, and it was just frustrating to listen to. He claimed he was a bit of a voice actor at one point, but he would just drone on and on. After that session, I just wished everyone well and left. One of the other players I had spoken to acknowledged how bad it was, but was staying because bad D&D is better than no D&D. The TM wanted to stream his campaign, but couldn't even be bothered to put much of any work into things beyond chests in the middle of rooms and rambling monologues. Well, take that as a word to the wise. You need to at least plan your D&D sessions a little bit. It truly does seem that, beyond taking from some kind of pre-established module, and not even completely from what it sounds like OP said, more just taking, the basic map, it almost sounds like. It really doesn't sound like they were really accounting for much. It sort of sounds like they had, a few bullet points of the things that they were going to make happen, and everything outside of those bullet points they just didn't want to deal with, and they just tried to avoid at all costs. And the thing is, it's really normal for new DMs especially to be really railroady, you know? When you're just starting out, you usually have a specific way you imagine things going, and you're not really quite accustomed to improvising right away. And a railroady game, especially in the first couple of sessions, isn't always a bad thing. It's just that it seems like this was one of those cases where the railroading was really a detriment to the fun of it. Not only that, but it just seems like even though the DM had an absolute bomb of a first session, they didn't learn anything from it. It sounded like it probably ran exactly the same because they figured the problem was with the players and not how they were running their game. I've also noticed this story that it does seem like the DM kind of has some, maybe is a bit too cocky for his own good. I'm mainly thinking of the fact that it was mentioned briefly that apparently he had said he had prior DMing experience before, and yet he'd never run a dungeon before. So was the prior DMing experience the one failed session that he ran? Or what? It does kind of sound like he might think he's better at this than he is. I do want to mention that whole first bit, though. Guys, that first bit about him talking about his previous session, that's not just a red flag. That is a banner that a plane flies across the sky, and it is not only scarlet red, but it is being trailed by Christmas lights. Guys, if you're ever going to join a game, and the DM talks about how their first time trying to run this game, 2 players dropped mid-session, and the 2 more of them quit immediately after the first session? Yeah. Unless it's the DM telling you that they realize they fucked up and they've improved it, it's not going to be worth your effort. And that's no hate or shame to OP. It does sound like they were kind of a bit of a newer player and didn't really realize how massive of a red flag that was. Anyway, a huge thank you, as always, to all of my lovely, lovely patrons. An even bigger thank you to the wonderful Banana Blotty, my lovely $50 patron. Thank you so much for your support. Please do leave a comment with your thoughts down below, and like and subscribe if you want to see more content, or even if you want to see animations, because I've started posting those on my channel now. But I will see you next time, my lords, ladies, and lieges. Zodiac, out.